Look at the window next to you on your next flight, and you'll notice it has rounded corners. Every airplane window does. It isn't for style, and it isn't an accident. It's because in the 1950s, a fleet of revolutionary new jetliners kept tearing themselves apart in midair, and the investigation traced the disaster back to something as small as the corner of a window. The plane was the de Havilland Comet, and in 1952, it was the future. The world's first commercial jet airliner, years ahead of anything American. While everyone else was still flying propellers, Britain had a sleek jet that cruised higher, faster, and far more smoothly than the competition. It was a national triumph. It was also, though nobody knew it yet, a death trap. The magic was the pressurized cabin. The Comet flew at nearly 40,000 feet, well above the weather, where the air is too thin to breathe. So the fuselage was sealed and pumped full of pressurized air, holding a comfortable pressure inside while the near vacuum outside tried to pull it apart. Passengers sat inside a very thin, very stretched aluminum balloon. Then, in early 1954, it started falling out of the sky. In January, a comet climbing out of Rome broke apart in midair and fell into the sea near the island of Elba. Everyone aboard was killed. There was no distress call, no warning, no obvious cause. The weather was clear. The plane simply came apart. The fleet was grounded, inspected, and cleared to fly again. And then, barely 3 months later, it happened a second time. Another comet, another midair breakup. This time, near Naples. Two brand new jets disintegrating in calm skies for no reason anyone could see. The Comet was grounded for good, and Britain launched one of the most thorough crash investigations in history. The wreckage was dragged up from the seabed and painstakingly reassembled. But the real breakthrough came from an experiment on the ground. Investigators took an entire Comet fuselage, built a giant tank around it, flooded it with water, and sealed the aircraft inside. Water, because if the fuselage burst, water wouldn't detonate the way pressurized air would. Then they cycled it. They pumped the cabin up to full flight pressure and released it over and over. Each cycle standing in for a single flight. Hour after hour, day after day, they flew that motionless fuselage thousands of imaginary times while it sat in a tank of water. And after the equivalent of a few thousand flights, it split open. The culprit was metal fatigue. And fatigue is sneaky because it has nothing to do with a single overload. You can take a metal part, load it to well within its rated strength, release it, and repeat, and each cycle does no visible harm at all. Do it enough times though, and the metal fails anyway. Here's why. Every time the Comet climbed, the cabin inflated and the aluminum skin stretched. Every time it landed, the cabin deflated and the skin relaxed. Inflate, deflate, once per flight, like flexing a paperclip back and forth. And you already know what happens to a paperclip you keep bending. It doesn't bend forever. It snaps. At the microscopic level, each cycle grows a tiny crack by a tiny amount. For a long time, you would never notice. Then the crack reaches a critical length, and in a single instant, it races across the metal faster than you can blink, and the pressurized fuselage unzips. That is what happens in calm skies twice. But fatigue cracks have to start somewhere, and they always start at the weakest point. On the Comet, that point was the corner of an opening cut into the skin, including, famously, the roughly square corners of the windows. Sharp corners are where stress goes to concentrate, and concentrated stress is exactly what fatigue feeds on. This is the part that rewrote engineering. Stress flows through a structure a bit like water through a channel. At a smooth, rounded edge, it flows past evenly, but force it around a sharp corner and it piles up, spiking to several times the average stress in the rest of the panel. A sharp corner is a stress magnet. The fix, once they understood it, was almost insultingly simple. Round the corners. Give the stress a smooth curve to flow around, instead of a sharp corner to pile against, and the concentration drops away. So the windows became ovals, the skin got thicker, and no sharp corner was ever again left in a pressurized aircraft cabin. By the time de Havilland fixed the Comet, the years they had lost handed the jet age to Boeing, whose 707 quietly took over the world. But every airliner built since carries the lesson in the shape of its window. That rounded corner you are looking at is there because, once, square ones killed people, and the engineers made very sure it would never happen again.